Hello and welcome. We're about to dive into a question that's really at the heart of the conversation between Christianity and Islam. And it's all about their holy books. How have the Bible and the Quran actually been preserved over all these centuries?
You know, for many sincere Muslims, there's a deeply held belief that the Quran is in what you might call read-only mode, a perfect copy of a heavenly book, totally unchanged. And from that viewpoint, it's natural to see the Bible as a book that's been in edit mode, changed and altered over time.
So, here's our plan. Let's just step back from the debate. Let's instead be humble explorers and simply look at the historical evidence together. Let's see if that common perspective really holds up when we examine the texts themselves.
We've got a pretty clear roadmap for this exploration. First, we'll look at the claim about the Quran's perfect preservation. Then we'll apply that exact same lens to the Bible, its manuscripts and its overall story. And finally, we'll get into a really fascinating logical puzzle that all this evidence brings up.
Okay, so let's start with that common assertion that there is one single, perfectly unchanged Quran all across the world.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. While the core message is definitely consistent, when historians look at the text, they find it's not quite that simple. There isn't just one single version, but actually several accepted and different reading traditions. In Islam, these are known as the Qira'at.
And out of these, there are two main ones. You have the Hafs recitation, which, almost everyone uses, about 95% of the Muslim world. But then there's the Warsh recitation, which is really common across North Africa.
And you might be thinking, okay, so what? Is this just like different accents? Well, it's actually much more than that. These differences can literally change the meaning of a sentence. Take a look here at Surah 3, verse 146. The standard Hafs version says that prophets fought with their followers, but the Warsh version says they were killed. I mean, fighting and being killed, that's a totally different historical event, right? And it's not just a one-off. Here's another example from Surah 21 where the actual speaker changes. The Hafs text reads, "He said," as in a statement made by Muhammad. But the Warsh text has it as "say," which is a direct command from Allah to Muhammad. The whole dynamic shifts.
Or look at this one from Surah 2. This difference actually changes a legal requirement. One text says to feed a single poor person. It uses the singular. The other uses the plural, which means feeding multiple poor people. It might seem small, but that little difference has a big impact on how someone follows the rule.
So here's the key takeaway. Textual variants exist in the Quranic tradition. Now, this is not a criticism, and it's certainly not some big secret. It's just a normal, expected feature of any ancient document that's been handed down for centuries.
Okay, so with that baseline, the understanding that variants are just a part of the history of ancient texts, let's turn that same exact historical lens onto the Bible.
Now let's just tackle the elephant in the room. You've probably heard the charge that the New Testament has hundreds of thousands of differences in its manuscripts, maybe even more variants than there are words. And you know what? That's technically true, but it's also incredibly misleading.
See, when we talk about variance, it's the kind of difference, not the number, that truly matters. And the reality is, over 99% of them are just simple spelling mistakes or scribes swapping the order of a few words, things that don't change the meaning one bit. In the end, less than 1% of all those variants are both meaningful and could possibly be original.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Even leading scholars who are very skeptical of the Bible, like Bart Ehrman, freely admit this. Not a single central, essential belief of Christianity is changed or challenged by any of these variants. The core message is completely secure.
And the timeline here is just so important to grasp. We have incredible manuscripts of the New Testament, like the famous Codex Sinaiticus, that date all the way back to the 4th century. That's hundreds of years before Muhammad was even born. And the amazing part? The text in those ancient copies is fundamentally the same Bible we read today.
So we've looked at the tiny details, but now let's zoom out. Way out. Let's look at the Bible's big picture. Across all those books, written by all those different authors, does it even tell a consistent story?
This, honestly, might be the most remarkable thing about the Bible. You've got 66 books, dozens of authors, written over 1,500 years, and somehow they all tell one single, unified story. It's often called the red thread of redemption. It's this one continuous idea that starts in Genesis with a promise of a rescuer, builds through the whole Old Testament, and finds its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus.
And the New Testament writers are explicit about this. They're constantly pointing back saying, hey, remember that promise God made to Abraham thousands of years ago? It wasn't about a whole group of people. It was pointing to this one person, who is Christ. It's just a stunningly consistent message from beginning to end.
Okay,
All of this now brings us to a really fascinating logical puzzle, and surprisingly, the clues for it are found right inside the Quran itself.
So, in a number of places, the Quran actually speaks very highly of the Bible, the Torah, and the Gospel. That was around in the 7th century, during Muhammad's lifetime. It calls the Bible guidance and light, and even encourages Christians to judge by what's written in it.
This creates a major dilemma. Let's just walk through the two possibilities. First, what if the Bible was corrupted before the 7th century? Well, if that were true, why on earth would the Quran endorse it and call it guidance? That would mean the Quran is pointing people to a faulty source. But what about the other option? What if the Bible was corrupted after the 7th century? Well, that idea is just completely contradicted by the physical, archaeological evidence we have. Manuscripts from centuries earlier that prove the text hasn't changed.
So, after this whole journey of exploration, what have we actually discovered? What does it all mean when you put it together?
Well, we've seen that small textual differences are a normal part of the history of all ancient books, including both the Quran and the Bible. We've seen that the Bible's textual history is incredibly strong and confirmed by ancient copies. We've also seen that its core message about Jesus is amazingly consistent over thousands of years. And finally, the claim that the Bible was corrupted creates a serious logical and historical problem for the Islamic view itself.
So, this leaves us with just one final thought to ponder. Which is ultimately more important? The tiny expected variations that happen when a text is copied by hand, or a central, world-changing message that has remained solid, consistent, and unshaken for millennia?